You think conflict avoidance is a weakness. But what if I told you it's actually your brain protecting you from something far more dangerous than an argument? Most people assume that those who dodge confrontation are simply afraid. Cowards even. But neuroscience tells a completely different story. A story about survival, about ancient programming, and about a threat detection system so sensitive it might actually be saving your life in ways you've never understood. Let me explain what's really happening inside your brain when you'd rather disappear than disagree. There's a study from 2019 at UCLA that scanned people's brains during simulated conflicts, and what they found was extraordinary. When conflict-avoidant individuals were exposed to confrontational scenarios, their amygdala didn't just activate, it followed. We're talking about a neural response comparable to physical danger, to being chased, to standing at the edge of a cliff. Your brain, quite literally, interprets confrontation as a survival threat. Now here's where it gets interesting. This isn't a malfunction. This is precision engineering from your evolutionary past. Because for most of human history, being cast out from your tribe was a death sentence. You couldn't hunt alone. You couldn't defend yourself alone. You needed the group. And conflict, disagreement, standing out as a dissenting voice, that put your membership at risk. So your ancestors, who had a hypersensitive conflict detection system, they survived. They stayed in the tribe. They passed on their genes. To you, you're not broken. You're the descendant of the most socially intelligent survivors in human history. But modern life has a cruel twist. Because today, disagreeing with your boss won't get you eaten by a predator. Saying no to a friend won't leave you starving in the wilderness. The stakes have changed dramatically, but your amygdala hasn't gotten the memo. It's still operating on ancient software in a modern world. Dr. Susan David at Harvard Medical School describes this as emotional inheritance. You're carrying threat responses calibrated for a world that no longer exists, and this creates what she calls the avoidance paradox. The more you avoid conflict to feel safe, the more trapped you become in situations that slowly drain your life force. Think about it. How many times have you stayed quiet when you desperately wanted to speak? How many relationships have you remained in long past their expiration date? How many hours of your finite life have you spent managing other people's emotions while neglecting your own? The safety your brain promised you turns into a prison you can't escape. Now let's go deeper into the neuroscience, because there's another chemical player in this story that nobody talks about. Oxytocin. You probably know oxytocin as the love hormone or the bonding chemical. It's released during hugs, during connection, during moments of trust. And here's the thing, conflict-avoidant people tend to have more sensitive oxytocin systems. Research from 2017 at the University of Amsterdam showed that individuals who score high on conflict avoidance also show heightened oxytocin receptor activity in the anterior cingulate cortex. Translation? Your brain is more rewarded by harmony than the average person. Peace doesn't just feel good to you. It feels essential, almost narcotic. But oxytocin has a shadow side that most people don't understand. It doesn't just promote bonding with your group. It also increases fear and aggression toward outsiders, toward threats to that harmony. And when you're wired for high oxytocin sensitivity, the prospect of conflict doesn't just mean discomfort. It means the potential collapse of the entire social structure your brain has built its sense of safety around. You're not just avoiding an argument. You're avoiding the neurochemical withdrawal of losing connection. There's a man I'll call David, not his real name, but his story is real. David was a senior manager at a tech company, respected, competent, and absolutely terrified of conflict. For 3 years, he said yes to every request, absorbed every criticism, and smiled to every passive-aggressive team meeting. He told himself he was being professional, being mature, being the bigger person. But inside, something was happening. His sleep deteriorated, his jaw clenched constantly. Even in his dreams, he developed tension headaches that no medication could touch. And one Tuesday morning, sitting in yet another meeting where his ideas were dismissed, he felt his heart race so violently he thought he was dying. It wasn't a heart attack, it was a panic attack. But his body had reached its limit, because here's what the research shows. Conflict avoidance doesn't make conflict disappear, it redirects it inward. The confrontation you won't have with others becomes a war your body wages against itself. A 2018 study in the Journal of Psychosomatic Research found that chronic conflict avoiders show significantly elevated cortisol levels, increased inflammation markers, and higher rates of autoimmune conditions. Your immune system quite literally starts attacking you as if you were the threat. The peace you're maintaining on the outside is causing chaos on the inside. But let's talk about what you gain from this pattern. Because despite everything, there are real advantages to having a conflict-avoidant brain. And I don't mean that in some consolatory, patronizing way. I mean there are actual cognitive benefits that most people will never experience. You're likely more observant than average. Studies show that people with heightened threat sensitivity process social cues faster and more accurately. You can read a room in seconds. You detect tension before it becomes obvious. You see patterns in group dynamics that others miss completely. This is a form of intelligence, social intelligence that borders on precognition. You're also probably more empathetic. That oxytocin sensitivity we talked about, it means you can feel other people's emotional states almost as if they were your own. You're the person people come to when they're hurting, when they need to be understood without judgment. That's not a small thing. That's rare. And there's something else, something researchers at Stanford discovered in 2020. Conflict-avoidant individuals tend to have richer inner lives, more complex internal narratives, more developed imaginations. Because while others are externalizing their tensions through arguments, you're internalizing, processing, creating entire worlds inside your mind to make sense of the chaos. You're not weak. You're just fighting different battles on different terrain. So what changes this? How do you rewire a system that's been running for thousands of years? First, you have to understand the difference between fear and danger. Your amygdala can't tell them apart, but your prefrontal cortex can. Fear is the feeling. Danger is the reality. And most of the conflicts you avoid are high fear, low danger. The feeling is enormous. The actual threat is minimal. Dr. Stret is minimal. Bessel van der Kolk, the trauma researcher, talks about something he calls befriending your nervous system. It means learning to sit with the physical sensations of conflict without immediately acting to make them stop. The racing heart, the tight chest, the urge to flee. You don't fight these feelings. You don't judge them. You just notice them, name them, watch them rise and eventually fall. Because here's the secret. The feeling always passes. Always. The confrontation your brain thinks will destroy you, it peaks in intensity around 90 seconds and then starts to decline. That's it. 90 seconds of discomfort in exchange for years of freedom. But most people never find this out because they run before the timer starts. There's another crucial piece. You have to separate your identity from your agreeableness, because somewhere along the way you learned that your value was contingent on keeping the peace, that love was conditional on never making waves, that being good meant being quiet. But think about what that really means. It means your entire sense of self is built on what you don't do, on what you suppress, on who you're not being. That's not an identity, that's an absence of identity dressed up as virtue. Real self-worth doesn't come from managing other people's comfort. It comes from knowing yourself deeply enough that external rejection can't erase you. It comes from understanding that conflict isn't the opposite of connection. Dishonesty is. A 2021 study at the University of Texas found something remarkable. They tracked conflict-avoidant individuals who began speaking up more authentically. And yes, some relationships ended. Some people got upset. But the participants reported something unexpected. They felt more connected than ever before because the relationships that remained were real, built on truth instead of performance, on actual compatibility instead of constant accommodation. The irony is that avoiding conflict to preserve relationships often destroys the very thing you're trying to protect. Here's what I want you to understand. Your conflict avoidance isn't a character flaw. It's not something you chose. It's an adaptation. A response to an environment that once punished you for being too loud, too demanding, too much. Maybe it was your family. Maybe it was school. Maybe it was a relationship that taught you that your needs were negotiable, but everyone else's were absolute. Your brain learned a lesson, and it learned it well. But adaptation isn't the same as destiny. You can honor where you came from while choosing a different path forward. You can acknowledge that your nervous system is trying to protect you, while also recognizing that its strategies are outdated, that they served you once, that they might have even saved you, but they're not serving you anymore. You don't have to become a fighter. You don't have to enjoy confrontation. You don't have to transform into someone loud and aggressive and combative. That's not the goal. The goal is to reclaim your voice, to learn that you can tolerate discomfort without it destroying you, that you can express a need without catastrophe following. That disagreement doesn't mean disconnection. The goal is to move from avoidance to choice, to respond instead of react, to speak when it matters and stay silent when it doesn't, but to make that decision consciously, not from a place of fear. Because here's the final piece, the most important piece. When you avoid all conflict, you're not just avoiding arguments, you're avoiding yourself, the parts of you that have opinions, the parts that have boundaries, the parts that know what you want and aren't afraid to name it, every time you choose silence over truth. A small part of you disappears. It doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual, almost imperceptible. But over years, over decades, you can wake up one day and realize you become a stranger to yourself. You know everyone else's preferences, everyone else's needs, everyone else's stories, but you have no idea what yours are anymore. That's the real cost. Not the conflicts you avoided, but the life you never claimed. So maybe it starts small. Maybe it's just saying no once this week without apologizing. Maybe it's expressing a preference instead of saying, I don't care, you choose. Maybe it's letting someone be disappointed in you and discovering that you survive it, that they survive it, that the relationship might actually get stronger because of it. Your brain will scream at you. It will flood you with fear signals. It will tell you this is dangerous. Remember, that's just the ancient alarm system doing its job. Thank it for trying to protect you, and then do it anyway. Because on the other side of that fear is something you've been searching for your entire life. Not just peace with others, but peace with yourself. The kind that doesn't depend on managing everyone else's emotions. The kind that comes from knowing you showed up as yourself and the world didn't end. You're not avoiding conflict because you're weak. You're doing it because you're wired for connection. Because you value harmony, because your brain is trying to keep you safe in the only way it knows how. That's beautiful. That's human, but it's time to teach your brain a new definition of safety, one that includes you. If this resonated with you, there's something else about your psychology I think you need to understand. Something about why certain people trigger you more than others, and what that reveals about the parts of yourself you've been hiding.